I woke up on the kitchen floor with my brother's laughter ringing in my ears and the taste of blood on my lip. I was 9 years old and I just had a seizure. Not the kind you see in movies where someone shakes dramatically and everyone rushes to help. Mine were quieter. My body would lock, my eyes would roll, and I'd crumple wherever I stood. That morning I dropped right next to the stove. My older brother, Patrick, stood over me with his phone out, recording. "Look at her face," he whispered to the camera, zoggling in while I twitched on the cold tile. "She looks like a dying fish." Behind him, through the doorway, I could see my mother at the dining table, stirring her coffee, watching. She didn't get up. She didn't tell him to stop. She took a sip and looked away. That video lived in Patrick's phone for 14 years. And the day it finally played on a screen that mattered, in a federal courtroom in front of a judge, 2 attorneys, and 31 strangers, my brother didn't laugh. He vomited into his hands. "My name is Megan Hale. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I was the problem." We lived in a 2-story colonial in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of house that looked like it belonged on a Christmas card. White columns, a wraparound porch, azaleas blooming every spring like clockwork. My mother, Diane, kept it immaculate. She ironed the curtains. She organized the spice rack alphabetically. She volunteered at every school event, always arriving with a tray of something homemade and a smile so bright it could blind you if you didn't know what lived behind it. My father, Glenn, was a softer presence, a tall man who spent most of his time in the garage restoring furniture nobody asked him to fix. He sanded and stained and polished, and I think he did it because it was the only thing in our house he was allowed to control. He never raised his voice. He never intervened. In our family, silence wasn't peace. It was permission. And then there was Patrick. 2 years older, sharper, louder. The firstborn son my mother treated like a crown jewel, and my father treated like a stranger he was afraid to confront. Patrick could say anything, do anything, break anything, and the house would rearrange itself around him like water filling a crack. If he insulted me at dinner, my mother would say I was being too sensitive. If he shoved me in the hallway, my father would suddenly need something from the garage. If I cried, I was told to go to my room until I could act normal. By the time I was 12, I had learned the rules. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't cry where anyone can see. Don't tell anyone outside the house what happens inside it. And above all, don't embarrass Patrick, because Patrick was the future of this family, and I was just the girl who had seizures and made things complicated. The only person who broke those rules was my grandfather, Earl. Grandpa Earl lived alone in a small bungalow near Forsyth Park. The place smelled like pipe, tobacco, and cedar, and every surface was covered in books he'd read twice. He was a retired history teacher, the kind who remembered every student's name and still got letters from them decades later. When I was with him, the noise in my head went quiet. He never told me to calm down. He never said I was imagining things. He'd pour me sweet tea, set out a chessboard, and say, "Tell me everything, Meggie. I've got nowhere to be." I told him about the recording Patrick made. I told him about the morning my mother found me on the bathroom floor after a seizure and stepped over me to get her curling iron. I told him about the time Patrick locked me in the basement during a family barbecue and told the guests I'd gone home early because she wasn't feeling well. Grandpa Earl listened to all of it. He wrote things down in a leather journal he kept on his nightstand. I didn't know why at the time. I thought it was just something old people did. "You remember everything, Meggie," he told me once, squeezing my hand. "Don't let anyone tell you that's a weakness." He died when I was 17. Heart attack, quick and quiet, just like him. At his funeral, my mother wore a black dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion and accepted condolences like she was hosting a cocktail party. Patrick didn't cry. My father stared at the casket like he wanted to climb in after him, and I sat in the back row, holding the chess piece Grandpa Earl had given me, a white queen, and made myself a promise I wouldn't be able to keep for another 14 years. After the funeral, things accelerated. My mother had always been strategic, but with Grandpa Earl gone, there was no one watching anymore. The first thing she did was clean out his house. I asked if I could have his journal. She said she'd already thrown everything away. It was just rambling, she told me. Old man stuff. Nothing important. I believed her. That was my first mistake. The second was leaving Savannah without looking back. At 18, I got into a nursing program in Denver. I packed 2 bags, took a Greyhound bus, and didn't tell anyone except my father, who nodded once and handed me $300 in an envelope without a word. My mother found out from a neighbor and called me a week later, not to wish me well, to tell me I'd humiliated her at church by disappearing without warning. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or the next 6 years. I became a pediatric nurse, working night shifts at a children's hospital where I held babies through seizures and whispered to them that they were safe, that someone was watching, that no one was going to record this and laugh. I built a life that was small and steady and mine, and I was almost convinced the past couldn't find me. Then the envelope arrived. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of crisp Denver evening where the mountains look like they've been cut from construction paper against the sky. I came home from a 12-hour shift, dropped my bag by the door, and sorted through the mail. Bill, catalog, flyer, and then a thick, cream-colored envelope with a Chatham County return address and the words Superior Court of Georgia printed in the corner. A subpoena, ordering me to appear as a witness in a civil case. The plaintiff, Patrick Hale. The defendant, a woman named Yolanda Price. I sat down on the edge of my bed and read the name 3 times. I didn't know a Yolanda Price. I hadn't spoken to Patrick in nearly 4 years, not since the last Christmas I'd made the mistake of attending, when he told the entire table that my seizures were psychosomatic and my mother nodded along like he'd just quoted a medical textbook. I almost threw the envelope away. Almost. But something about the name Yolanda Price stayed with me, the way a word you can't quite place sits at the edge of your tongue. So I did what I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I searched for her. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. Yolanda Price, former operations manager at Hale & Associates, the consulting firm my brother had started 3 years ago with money from Grandpa Earl's estate. The second result was a blog post on Medium, published 8 days earlier, titled, "The Real Patrick Hale, What His Family Won't Tell You." My hands were shaking before I finished the first paragraph. Yolanda described a workplace run on fear, screaming behind closed doors, credit stolen from junior staff, a culture of humiliation disguised as high standards. She described being demoted after reporting Patrick to HR for threatening her in a meeting. She described the smear campaign that followed, how Patrick told clients she was unstable, how he pressured other employees to stop speaking to her. And then, in the final section, she wrote something that made the room tilt. If you want to understand who Patrick Hale really is, ask his sister. Ask her about the video he recorded when she was 9 years old, seizing on the kitchen floor while he laughed. Ask her why her family spent 2 decades making sure no one believed a word she said. The pattern didn't start at this company. It started in that house. I closed the laptop, opened it again, read it a 4th time. Then I walked to the bathroom, sat on the floor, and cried in a way I hadn't since I was 17. Someone knew. Someone had seen the pattern. The question I couldn't answer was how. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I'd avoided for 14 years. I went through the box I'd kept in the back of my closet since the day I left Savannah. Inside were the few things I'd taken with me. A photo of Grandpa Earl and me at the park, the white queen chess piece, a birthday card he'd written me when I turned 15. To Meggie, the bravest person I know, keep remembering. Love, Grandpa. And at the very bottom, an old external hard drive. It was one of Grandpa Earl's. I'd grabbed it from his office the day after his funeral, before my mother finished clearing the house. I had never opened it. Part of me was afraid it would be empty. Part of me was afraid it wouldn't. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Her name was Caroline Reeves. In high school, she'd been the girl everyone underestimated. Quiet, always scribbling in notebooks, invisible in the way only smart girls from modest families can be in a town like Savannah. Patrick had once dumped a Gatorade on her backpack in the cafeteria and called her charity case in front of 30 people. I was the only one who helped her dry her books. We weren't close after that, but she never forgot it. Caroline was now a digital forensics analyst at a cybersecurity firm in Atlanta, the kind of person who could recover a text message you deleted 3 phones ago. When I told her what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Ship me the hard drive overnight," she said. "And Megan, Whatever's on there, we'll find it. 2 days later, Caroline called me back. Her voice was different, tight, controlled. The voice of someone trying to stay professional while sitting on a bomb. "Megan, your grandfather was meticulous," she said. "This drive has everything, and I mean everything." Grandpa Earl hadn't just kept a journal. He'd kept a digital archive, organized by year, 2003 through 2015, the year he died. Inside were scanned copies of his handwritten notes, dated and detailed, descriptions of things I'd told him, things he'd observed during family dinners, conversations he'd overheard between Diane and Patrick when they thought he was napping in the next room. He had preserved screenshots of text messages between my mother and brother, taken from the family desktop computer when he visited and they left the room. He'd saved forwarded emails, ones my mother had accidentally sent to the family group chain before quickly deleting them, not realizing her father-in-law had already opened them on his phone. And in a folder labeled 2006 Kitchen Do Not Delete, there was a video file. Not Patrick's video. A second angle. Grandpa Earl had been in the living room that morning, just around the corner. He'd heard me fall. He'd grabbed his phone. And while Patrick recorded me from above, laughing, Grandpa Earl had recorded Patrick. The footage showed my brother standing over me, phone in hand, zooming in on my face while I seized. It showed my mother in the background, watching, drinking coffee. And then it showed something Patrick's version never captured. My mother looking directly at Patrick and smiling. Not a shocked smile. Not a nervous one. A proud one. Caroline's voice came through the phone like a lifeline. "Megan, this isn't just evidence. This is a pattern documented over 12 years by someone who loved you. Your grandfather built this for you." I pressed my palm against my chest and felt the old familiar tightness, but this time it wasn't a seizure. It was something breaking open, something beginning to breathe. I called a lawyer the next morning. Her name was Audrey Simmons, a civil litigation attorney in Savannah who specialized in family disputes and workplace retaliation cases. When I explained the situation, the subpoena, Yolanda's lawsuit, the hard drive, the video, the emails, she went quiet for a long time. "Megan," she finally said, "you're not just a witness in Yolanda's case, you're the case. Everything she's alleging about Patrick's behavior at work is a continuation of what your grandfather documented at home. If we present this correctly, it doesn't just support her claims, it establishes a lifelong pattern of cruelty, manipulation, and cover-up." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "You need to come home." 3 weeks later, I landed in Savannah for the first time in 6 years. The air hit me the moment I stepped outside the terminal. Thick, warm, sweet with magnolia and memory. I rented a car and drove past the old house on Abercorn Street without stopping. The azaleas were blooming, the curtains were freshly ironed. Nothing had changed on the outside. It never did. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday at the Chatham County Courthouse. Yolanda's legal team had filed a motion to introduce the hard drive contents as evidence of a pattern of conduct, and the judge had granted it over Patrick's attorney's objections. Caroline flew in from Atlanta to authenticate the files and testify to their integrity. Audrey prepped me for 3 straight days, walking me through every question I might face, every trap Patrick's lawyer might set. "They're going to say you're bitter," Audrey told me. "They'll say you're estranged, emotionally unstable, that your seizures affected your memory. They'll try to make this about your credibility." "My family spent 20 years doing that," I said. "I know how it works." She looked at me for a long moment. "Then let's show them it doesn't work anymore." Monday came with a sky that couldn't decide between gray and blue. I wore a navy blazer Grandpa Earl would have called sharp and carried the white queen chess piece in my pocket like a talisman. The courthouse lobby smelled like floor polish and old paper. My heels clicked on the marble as I walked toward courtroom 4B, each step louder than the last. Inside, Yolanda sat with her attorney near the defense table. She was smaller than I'd imagined, a woman in her late 40s with close-cropped hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. When she saw me, her eyes filled. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then the doors opened behind me, and the air in the room changed. Patrick walked in first. He'd gained weight since I last saw him, but still carried himself like someone who expected the room to rearrange for his comfort. His suit was expensive. His watch was loud. His attorney followed 2 steps behind, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my rent. then my mother. Diane Hale entered the courtroom the way she entered every room, like she owned it, and was doing everyone a favor by showing up. Pearl earrings, pressed blouse, a smile calibrated to convey warmth without vulnerability. She looked around the gallery with the serene confidence of a woman who had never been publicly contradicted. My father came last. Glenn walked with his shoulders caved in, hands buried in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. Like someone who'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had forgotten how to set it down. When Patrick saw me sitting beside the defense, he stopped mid-step. His jaw tightened. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered something sharp. His attorney shook his head. My mother's smile didn't waver, but I saw her fingers tighten around her purse strap, knuckles whitening, the only crack in the porcelain. The judge entered. Honorable Sandra Whitfield, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a gaze that made the room feel like it had been placed under a microscope. Court is in session, she announced. We'll begin with the plaintiff's opening statement. Patrick's attorney stood and delivered exactly what Audrey had predicted. He painted Yolanda as a disgruntled former employee. He called her blog post defamatory fiction. He described Patrick as a visionary entrepreneur, a community leader, a man whose success had made him a target for jealousy. He spoke for 12 minutes, and every word was polished, practiced, and hollow. Then it was Yolanda's turn. Her attorney, a sharp woman named Diane Chen, kept it brief. Your Honor, the defense will demonstrate that Mr. Hale's behavior toward Miss Basilina's 11 Redder on Price was not an isolated incident, but part of a documented, decades-long pattern of psychological abuse. We will present authenticated digital evidence, including files preserved by a deceased family member, and testimony from a direct witness to Mr. Hale's conduct beginning in childhood. The room shifted. Patrick's attorney objected. Judge Whitfield overruled him without looking up. They called me to the stand. I stood, and for a moment the courtroom blurred. 31 strangers watching me. My mother's eyes on my back like a sunburn. Patrick's jaw working silently. My father's head still bowed. I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Patrick's attorney approached first. He smiled the way people smile when they think they're smarter than you. Miss Hale, you haven't spoken to your family in 4 years? Closer to 6 with any regularity, I said. And would you say that distance might color your recollection of events? No. Distance gave me clarity. When you're inside something, it's hard to see the shape of it. You suffer from epilepsy, correct? I have epilepsy. I don't suffer from it. I suffered from the people who used it against me. A murmur moved through the gallery. He adjusted his tie. Is it possible that your medical condition has affected your ability to accurately recall childhood events? Audrey stood. Objection. Counsel is not a neurologist, and no medical expert has been presented to support this line of questioning. Sustained, Judge Whitfield said. Move on, counselor. He tried 2 more angles, each one a variation of the same strategy. Make me seem fragile, confused, unreliable. Each time, I answered calmly. Each time, Audrey was ready. Then it was our turn. Caroline approached the display screen at the front of the courtroom. She connected her laptop and walked the judge through the chain of custody. The hard drive, its recovery, the metadata timestamps, the folder structure, the authentication process. She was precise and unhurried, the kind of witness who made juries trust the evidence because they trusted the person presenting it. The archive contains 247 files spanning 12 years, Caroline said, including scanned handwritten notes, recovered emails, text message screenshots, and 3 video files. All metadata is consistent with the dates indicated and shows no signs of tampering or alteration. Judge Whitfield nodded. Proceed. The first exhibit was an email from 2008. My mother to my brother, sent the morning after I'd had a seizure at a family dinner in front of relatives. Diane Chen read it into the record. Patrick, I talked to your Aunt Linda this morning. She's concerned about Megan. I told her Megan has always been dramatic, and that the doctors say it's mostly psychological. I also told her you've been wonderful about it. Very patient with your sister. Keep it up. We need everyone on the same page. I watched my mother's face as the words filled the room. Her expression didn't change. She sat perfectly still, the way a statue sits still, because it has no choice. The second exhibit was a text exchange from 2011, the year I left for Denver. Patrick to Diane. She's telling people she's leaving because of us. What do we do? Diane to Patrick. Same thing we always do. I'll call Pastor Morrison and the book club girls. By the time she's gone, everyone will think she left because she couldn't handle being on her own. Let her go. She'll fail and come crawling back. Glenn shifted in his seat. He still hadn't looked up. Then, Caroline opened the video folder. Your Honor, Diane Chen said, the defense would like to present video evidence recorded on 2 separate devices on the morning of March 14, 2006. Judge Whitfield glanced at Patrick's attorney, who objected loudly, citing relevance and emotional prejudice. The judge denied the objection. The court has already ruled this evidence admissible. Proceed. The lights dimmed. The first video was Patrick's recording, the one he'd kept on his phone all those years, recovered from a cloud backup linked to the family computer. There I was, 9 years old, on the kitchen floor. My body locked, my eyes rolled back, my fingers twitching against the tile. Patrick's voice, young and bright and cruel. Look at her face. She looks like a dying fish. The camera shook with his laughter. Several people in the gallery looked away. One woman pressed her hand over her mouth. Yolanda closed her eyes. Then Caroline played the second video, Grandpa Earl's. The angle was different, wider, shot from the living room doorway. It showed Patrick standing over me with his phone. It showed my body on the floor. And it showed clearly and unmistakably my mother sitting at the dining table 6 feet away. She looked at Patrick. She looked at me. And then she smiled at him. A small, satisfied smile, like a coach watching a player execute a drill perfectly. The courtroom went silent. Not the polite silence of procedure. The deep, ringing silence of people confronting something they can't unsee. Judge Whitfield removed her glasses. She set them down carefully on the bench. She looked at my mother for a long, unbroken moment. Then she looked at Patrick. Patrick was breathing hard. His face had gone the color of old paper. His attorney put a hand on his arm, but Patrick shook it off. He stood halfway as if to speak, then sat back down. Then he stood again, knocking his chair backward, and said in a voice that cracked like a teenager's, "That's not, you don't understand. She was always. Mom told me she was faking." Mom said. "Mr. Hale," Judge Whitfield said. "Sit down." He didn't. He turned toward my mother. Tell them what you told me. Tell them she was faking." Diane Hale sat frozen. Her composure was gone, and what remained underneath was not a person I recognized. Not angry, not defiant, empty. The face of someone who had just realized that the structure she'd built her entire identity around was collapsing in real time, on the record, in front of strangers. "Tell them!" Patrick's voice rose to something between a shout and a sob. His attorney pulled him back into his chair. Patrick put his head in his hands and made a sound I'd never heard from him before. Guttural, broken, the sound of someone confronting the fact that they'd built their confidence on cruelty and there was nothing underneath. Then he lurched forward, cupped his hands over his mouth, and vomited. Right there, at the plaintiff's table, in front of the judge, the attorneys, the gallery, and the sister he'd once filmed seizing on the kitchen floor for fun. Judge Whitfield waited. The bailiff brought paper towels. The room held its breath. When order was restored, the judge spoke slowly and clearly. The court has reviewed the submitted evidence, including the authenticated digital archive, the recovered emails and text messages, the video recordings, and the testimony provided. The pattern documented here is extensive, consistent, and deeply disturbing. The plaintiff's claims of defamation are not supported by the evidence. Miss Price's statements, while damaging to Mr. Hale's reputation, appear to be substantiated by a documented history of psychological cruelty, manipulation, and coordinated efforts to discredit a family member with a medical condition. She paused. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Court costs are assigned to the plaintiff. Additionally, the court is referring the video evidence and related documentation to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal conduct, including but not limited to failure to render aid to a minor and willful child neglect. The gavel came down like a door closing on 22 years of silence. I didn't move. I sat in my chair, hands flat on the table, and breathed. Just breathed. For the first time in as long as I could remember, the air went all the way in. Yolanda reached over and squeezed my hand. Caroline, standing by the display screen, gave me a small nod. Audrey gathered her files, but I caught the shine in her eyes before she looked away. As the room cleared, Patrick was escorted out by his attorney, head down, hands still trembling. My mother stood slowly, like someone waking from anesthesia, and walked out without looking at anyone. She didn't speak. She didn't perform. For the first time in my life, Diane Hale had nothing to say. My father lingered. He stood in the aisle, hands at his sides, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It wasn't guilt. It was recognition. The look of a man finally seeing something he'd spent 20 years pretending wasn't there. "Megan," he said quietly, "I should have picked you up off that floor." I looked at him for a long time. "Yes," I said, "you should have." He nodded once, slowly, like the words were settling into his bones. Then he turned and walked out. I let him go, not because I didn't care, but because I'd spent my whole life waiting for people in that family to do the right thing, and I was finished waiting. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and thorough. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation into the 2006 incident. Patrick's company lost 3 major clients within a month after Yolanda's case made local news. His business partner issued a public statement distancing the firm from its founder. By winter, Hale and Associates had dissolved. Patrick moved into a rental apartment in Pooler and stopped returning calls. My mother's world contracted in a different way. For years, Diane Hale had curated a public identity so carefully it might as well have been laminated. But the emails read in open court were now part of the public record. Her church group asked her to step back from the women's ministry. Neighbors who'd waved to her every morning for 30 years suddenly found reasons to cross the street. She wasn't shunned violently. She was simply erased. Quietly, politely, the way she'd once erased me. The estate review came next. Grandpa Earl had left most of his savings and his bungalow to my mother as executor, with instructions that a portion go to me. An audit of the estate records revealed that my share, roughly $220,000, had been redirected entirely to Patrick's business under my mother's supervision. The probate court ordered full restitution. When the judgment was delivered, my mother didn't contest it. She didn't have the energy left. Or maybe she didn't have the audience. My father filed for divorce in January. It was quiet, uncontested, and final. He moved into a small apartment near the river and started volunteering at a woodworking shop for at-risk teens. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He didn't ask me for anything. I think, for the first time in his life, Glenn Hale was trying to become the man he should have been all along. I wasn't ready to let him back in, but I left the door unlocked. Yolanda won a separate settlement from the company's insurance carrier. She used part of it to start a nonprofit helping people document workplace abuse with proper legal support. She asked me to sit on the advisory board. I said yes before she finished the sentence. And I took Grandpa Earl's bungalow, the one I used to escape to on weekends when the house on Abercorn Street felt like it was swallowing me whole. I kept his bookshelves. I kept his chessboard. I set the white queen in the center of it, where it catches the light every morning when I open the curtains. I created a scholarship fund in his name, the Earl Hale Memorial Fund for young women in forensic science, because it felt right that his legacy should help people uncover the truth the way he'd spent 12 years quietly uncovering mine. Some nights, I still wake up with my chest tight, reaching for something that isn't there. Old reflexes. The body remembers what the mind tries to file away, but the tightness passes faster now. It passes because I know something I didn't know for 22 years. I was never the problem. I was never dramatic. I was never too much. I was a child who deserved to be picked up off the floor, and instead was surrounded by people who watched me fall and called it entertainment. My grandfather saw it. He documented it. He built an archive of truth and left it where I would eventually find it, because he believed that one day I would be strong enough to use it. He was right. I don't carry the chess piece in my pocket anymore. I don't need to. The queen is home, and so am I. If my story sounds familiar, if you grew up in a house where the outside looked perfect and the inside felt like suffocation, I want you to know something. Your memory is not broken. Your feelings are not exaggerated. And the people who told you otherwise were not protecting you. They were protecting themselves. You deserve to breathe. You always did. If this story moved you, share your experience in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Bone Revenge. We'll We'll see you in the next one.